Aiden Langley didn't expect his entire morning to change because of a damn suitcase. He was rushing across the busy terminal of Grand Central Station, his 6-year-old daughter, Sophie, clinging to his hand while her pink backpack bounced at her side. His cap was pulled low, his gray hoodie wrinkled, and the sleeves of his flannel shirt still damp from the morning dishwashing shift at the diner. He was exhausted, broke, and late for the after-school program drop-off. That's when he saw her. She was struggling at the bottom of the stairs, heels too high, suitcase too heavy, and clearly not from around here. Her sleek black bag was jammed halfway up the steps, and everyone kept walking by like she was invisible. But not Aiden. "Hold on," he said, nudging Sophie gently behind him. "I got it." The woman turned. Her face was flushed, hair falling from what had probably been a perfect bun this morning. Her deep green coat looked expensive, but her eyes, sharp and startled, held a mix of pride and panic. "I can." "No offense," Aiden said, already hoisting the suitcase over his shoulder, "but that bag looks like it's packed with bricks and regret." A breathless laugh escaped her lips. "You have no idea." Sophie tugged his sleeve. "Daddy, we're gonna be late." "I know, Bug, 2 seconds." He climbed the stairs with the suitcase, set it down with a thud at the top, then turned to offer the woman a hand. She hesitated for half a second, then took it. Her grip was soft but firm. "Thanks." "No problem." He was about to walk away when she asked, "What's your name?" He glanced over his shoulder. "Aiden, and that's Sophie." She nodded slowly, like she was memorizing it. "I'm Fallon." "Well, Fallon," he said, adjusting Sophie's backpack. "Maybe next time pack less shoes." She laughed again, this time fuller. "Hey, I'm in town for business. A woman needs options." He gave her a lopsided grin. "Next time, hire a bellhop." Then he was gone. Fallon Fields stood frozen on the platform as the man and his daughter disappeared into the crowd. No one had carried her bag in years. Not since she was promoted from junior partner to CEO of Fields and Carter, one of Manhattan's most powerful real estate firms. She had people for everything: drivers, assistants, interns. But that man had just helped her without asking for anything in return. And there was something about him. Something honest, real. 2 days later, Aiden was juggling a tray of plates at Deacon's diner when he heard a familiar voice. "Is the coffee any good here?" He turned. Fallon was standing at the counter wearing a crisp white blouse tucked into designer jeans, a navy trench coat draped over one arm. She looked like she belonged in a corner office, not a greasy spoon on West 49th. "It's burnt and bitter," he said, "like my soul." She laughed. "Perfect, I'll take a cup." He poured her one. "What are you doing here?" "I was in the neighborhood," she said, lifting the mug. "Figured owed the mystery man who saved my suitcase a thank you." He raised an eyebrow. "You tracked me down for coffee." "I asked around the station. You're not exactly hard to find. Tall guy, flannel shirt, dragging a kid with a unicorn backpack." He chuckled. "Sophie's a fan of unicorns and glitter and chaos." Fallon leaned in slightly. "You always work 2 jobs." "3 sometimes," he said, placing a plate in front of another customer. "Dishwasher in the mornings, server in the afternoons, handyman for the building after hours. Gotta keep the lights on." She blinked. "What about Sophie's mom?" "Gone 2 years now." "I'm sorry." He shrugged, but she could see the weight behind his eyes. Fallon sipped her coffee. "You're doing a good job." "With what?" "Everything." Aiden stared at her for a second too long. "Why do get the feeling you're not just some lady with a heavy suitcase?" She smiled. "You'll find out soon enough." Fallon came back the next day. And the next. And by the 5th day, Aiden was pouring her coffee without asking. She sat at the counter while he worked, chatting with Sophie when she stopped by after her classes, helping her with homework, even bringing little gifts books, art supplies, sparkly hair clips. Sophie adored her instantly. And Aiden, well, Aiden was trying not to. Because Fallon was polished, powerful, and clearly from a different world than his. She didn't belong in his messy little life. But she kept showing up. One night after closing, they walked out together. The city lights sparkled above them, the air crisp with early spring. "You don't have to keep coming here, you know," he said. "I want to." He looked at her, really looked at her. "Why?" She hesitated. "Because when I'm here, I don't feel like I have to be anyone else." Aiden swallowed hard. "You're not like me." "No," she said, "but maybe that's not a bad thing." He didn't kiss her. But he thought about it all night. A week later, Fallon invited him to dinner. "Someplace nice," she said. "My treat." Aiden tried to protest, but she insisted. He barely recognized her when she stepped out of the car in a black dress that made his brain short-circuit. They went to a rooftop restaurant overlooking the skyline, soft jazz playing as waiters brought plates he couldn't pronounce. "You really didn't have to do all this," he said, blinking at the wine list. "I wanted to." "Fallon, what do you do exactly?" She met his eyes across the candlelit table. "I'm the CEO of Fields and Carter." Aiden choked on his water. "You're a what?" "Real estate. We own about 20 buildings in the city. Offices, luxury condos, commercial spaces." He stared at her. "So, you're rich." She gave a soft smile. "Very." He leaned back in his chair. "Why me, Fallon?" "You carried my suitcase without knowing who I was. You treat your daughter like she's the center of the universe. You work 3 jobs without complaining. You're kind, honest, real." He shook his head slowly. "I don't live in your world." She reached across the table and took his hand. "Maybe I'm tired of mine." And just like that, everything changed. "You didn't have to walk me all the way here," Fallon said as they reached the front of her building, a sleek high-rise nestled between 2 art galleries on the Upper West Side. Her heels clicked softly against the pavement, but her tone was lighter than it had been all evening. Aiden looked up at the glass tower. "You live here?" "I do." He gave a short whistle. "Must be nice having a doorman who probably makes more than I do in a week." "You want to come up?" she asked. He hesitated. "Sophie's with my neighbor. I told her I'd be back by 10. Fallon reached into her clutch and pulled out a slim keycard, dangling it between her fingers. "Then come up until 9:59. The elevator was silent as it carried them skyward. Aiden kept his hands in his pockets. Fallon leaned back against the mirrored wall, watching him. The numbers ticked up 42, 43, 44. When the doors slid open, they stepped into a penthouse that didn't look like it belonged in the real world. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the skyline, soft lighting pooled across marble floors, and minimalist furniture gave the whole place a kind of curated stillness. Aiden turned once slowly. "This doesn't feel like you." Fallon slipped off her coat and tossed it over the back of a cream leather chair. "It's not. My assistant hired a designer. Approved the mock-ups between board meetings." He walked to the window, looking out at the city. "Do you ever sit down and just exist in here?" She crossed the room, barefoot now. "Sometimes, when I remember how." Aiden turned to face her. "What made you come to the diner that first day?" "I was supposed to catch a car service to a pitch meeting, but after you helped me with the bag, I couldn't stop thinking about you. It felt like I'd been dropped into someone else's life for a second, and I didn't want to climb out of it." He studied her for a long beat. You said you don't feel like you have to be someone else when you're with me. Why? Because you don't want anything from me. I don't have time to want anything. She stepped closer, then let me give you something. Fallon, I'm not offering charity, I'm offering a chance. His jaw tensed. Because of what? A suitcase and a few cups of coffee. Because I see how hard you're fighting, and I want to fight with you, not against you. There was a long pause. Then he said, that sounds an awful lot like a rescue. I don't think you need rescuing, Aiden. I think you need someone who doesn't flinch when things get messy. He looked at her then, really looked, and something shifted behind his eyes. He kissed her not tentative, not hesitant, but with the kind of certainty he hadn't dared feel in years. When he pulled back, she was breathing just a little faster. 9:59, he said. She nodded, her fingers still curled into his jacket. Then, let's make every second count. The next morning, Fallon stood barefoot at her kitchen island, pouring coffee into 2 matching ceramic mugs. The city spread out behind her like a painting. Aiden had left at dawn, but she could feel his presence still lingering in the air, the way he'd laughed when she tried to cook eggs, the way he'd tucked a strand of hair behind her ear before leaving. She wasn't used to men disappearing before breakfast without leaving some kind of message. But Aiden had simply kissed her temple and whispered, "Thank you." Later that day, she sat in a boardroom surrounded by men in suits discussing a potential acquisition. But her mind kept drifting back to the way his voice had rasped her name in the dark. Across town, Aiden was fixing a leaking pipe in a tenant's bathroom when his phone buzzed. The screen lit up with a number he didn't recognize. Hello. Aiden, it's Fallon's assistant. She asked me to call you. He straightened. Is something wrong? No, nothing like that. Ms. Fields has a charity gala this Friday. She'd like you to attend. He wiped his hand on a rag. That's not really my scene. She's already arranged for a suit, shoes, and transportation. Everything will be waiting. Aiden stared at the cracked tile in front of him. Let me guess, this is happening whether I say yes or not. I believe she's hoping you'll say yes. When he showed up Friday night, the driver handed him a garment bag and a note. Aiden. Come as you are, but maybe just a little sharper tonight. I want them to see what I see. Fallon. The suit fit better than anything he'd ever worn. Black, tailored, with a crisp white shirt and smooth lapels. The shoes gleamed. His daughter had gasped when she saw him. You look like one of those guys in the movies, Daddy. He'd kissed her forehead. Let's hope I don't trip over my own feet. The venue was a marble palace in Midtown, chandeliers glittering above a sea of gowns and tuxedos. Fallon stood near the bar, her dress a deep midnight blue, hair swept up in soft waves. When she turned and spotted him, her expression changed, something subtle, something private. You clean up dangerously well, she said as he approached. And you look expensive. She laughed. I missed that mouth. He offered his arm. You sure you want me next to you tonight? People might talk. I'm counting on it. The night unfolded like a dream he hadn't dared imagine. She introduced him to senators, venture capitalists, and 2 film producers. He managed to make them laugh, once even correcting someone's math under his breath, earning a surprised glance from a hedge fund manager. Later, as the orchestra played something sweeping, Fallon leaned in and whispered, "What would you do if you had $1 million? I'd buy every hour of my life back from the last 6 years, he said. Every hour I missed with Sophie. She looked at him, her expression unreadable. Then maybe we need to start doing more than just surviving. He turned his head. What are you saying? I'm saying I want to be part of that future, if you'll let me. He didn't answer right away, but the way his hand curled around hers told her everything she needed to know. Somewhere between the chandeliers and the champagne, the struggling dad and the powerful CEO stopped existing as opposites and started becoming something that didn't have a name yet. But it felt real. And Fallon had never wanted anything more. The next morning, Fallon stepped out of a black car in front of a narrow brick building on West 87th Street, dressed not for a boardroom or a gala, but in dark jeans, boots, and a wool coat. She carried a cardboard box in both hands and pressed the buzzer beside the chipped mailbox labeled Langley. Aiden opened the door wearing sweats and a faded t-shirt, his hair still damp from a shower. "Did I forget something at your place?" "No," Fallon said, holding out the box. "You're always helping me. I thought I'd return the favor." He took the box with one hand and stepped aside to let her in. "You brought muffins." "Homemade," she said. "Well, not by me. I bribed the pastry chef at Le Vespertine to teach me. I almost set a towel on fire." Aiden raised an eyebrow but said nothing as she followed him up the stairs. The apartment was small, with mismatched furniture and a curtain that didn't quite cover the window, but the scent of fresh coffee filled the space, and Sophie's laughter echoed from the back room. "She's playing with Sophia next door," Aiden said, setting the box on the counter. "Mrs. Tran watches them both on Saturdays." Fallon ran a hand over the back of a bar stool. "I thought about you all week." "Yeah," Aiden poured 2 mugs of coffee without asking. "I thought about you too, especially when I nearly flooded the boiler room yesterday." "That sounds dangerous." "Only if you're attached to hot water." He handed her a mug, and she leaned against the counter, watching him. "I wanted to ask you something," she said after a pause. "It's about your drawings." He froze. "What drawings?" "The ones on your fridge, and I saw one in Sophie's backpack. A sketch of the carousel in Central Park. You drew that, didn't you?" He glanced toward the fridge, where a few curled papers clung under alphabet magnets. "It's just something I used to do. I don't have time now." "You're talented." Aiden took a sip of coffee. "Doesn't pay the bills." "It could, Aiden, if you let it." He gave her a long look. "Why is it so important to you?" "Because, think you've been surviving for so long, you forgot what it feels like to want something just for yourself." He didn't answer, but she could tell he was listening. Later, they took Sophie to the Natural History Museum. Aiden carried her on his shoulders through the dinosaur exhibit while Fallon snapped photos with a disposable camera Sophie had begged for outside. Fallon had never spent a Saturday like this without meetings, pressure, or obligations. Just the 3 of them, wandering hallways filled with bones and light. That evening, when Sophie was back with Mrs. Tran, Aiden walked Fallon home. They strolled along the river, the wind tugging at her coat, his hand brushing hers occasionally but not quite holding it. "This is risky," he said after a while. "What is?" "You and me, we live on different planets." She stopped walking. "Then let's make one of our own." He stared at her. "You really think this can work?" "No," she said with a half grin. "I know it can. I've run numbers on worse odds." Aiden gave a low laugh, but it faded quickly. "I've never had anything like this, not with anyone." "Then we're both new at it." He looked at her, the lines around his eyes deepening. "If this goes wrong, Sophie gets caught in it." Fallon nodded. "I thought about that. That's why I'm not playing at this. I don't do anything halfway." They stood in silence for a long moment before he finally reached for her hand. "Okay," he said. "Let's see what happens." 2 weeks passed in a blur. Fallon carved out time between real estate closings and development meetings to spend evenings at Aiden's apartment, helping Sophie with school projects or watching old movies on a laptop propped up on a stack of books. Aiden came to her office once, arriving in work boots and a navy thermal shirt, looking wildly out of place among the glass walls and polished surfaces. She introduced him to her assistant as someone important, and when Aiden caught the amused look the assistant gave him, he only said, "She makes me take vitamins now." That earns her the title. On a rainy Thursday, Fallon invited them both to a private event her company was hosting an unveiling for a luxury housing development on the Hudson. It was formal, with photographers, champagne, and investors flown in from 3 continents. Fallon wore a tailored black jumpsuit and diamond earrings. Aiden wore the suit she'd altered for him, though he quietly clipped Sophie's pink hair bow to the inside of his jacket pocket before stepping out of the car. Inside, Fallon introduced him to her board. Aiden shook hands, answered questions politely, and even debated an architect on the ethics of displacing tenants for luxury units. Fallon watched, impressed but unsurprised. Later, as they stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the river, Aiden leaned in. "You're not scared of what people say?" Fallon's gaze slid to a woman whispering behind a wine glass. "They've been whispering about me since I was 24 and took over the company. If they're bored enough to do it again, I'll take it as a compliment." He leaned closer. "You're still full of surprises." "I hope so," she said with a small smile, "because I have one." Aiden gave her a wary glance. "What kind?" She reached into her clutch and handed him a slim envelope. Inside was a sketchbook his own, bound and scanned, and a letter from a gallery in Soho. "I showed your work to someone. They want to feature 10 pieces in a new exhibit." His jaw tightened. "You did this behind my back." "I did it for you. You spend every day doing things for everyone else. I wanted to give something back." His voice was low. "You don't get to decide what I want." "I didn't," she said calmly. "I just opened a door. You can close it if you want." He didn't respond. Instead, he folded the envelope and looked out over the water. "I need to think." Fallon nodded once. "I'll give you time." That night, she didn't hear from him. The next day, she didn't either. On the 3rd day, she stopped by the diner. He wasn't there. The manager said he'd taken time off and hadn't said why. Fallon walked out into the cold with her coat unbuttoned, the wind biting at her collar. She had risked everything to open her heart, and maybe he had been right. Maybe their worlds weren't just different. Maybe they were incompatible. But even as she reached the corner and paused under the awning of a florist closing for the night, she felt a flicker of something deep in her chest, not regret. Hope. Because Aiden Langley was not the kind of man who ran away. He was the kind who returned when it mattered. Aiden didn't return Fallon's calls. Not the first day, not the second, not the third. Instead, he buried himself in work repairs in the building, extra shifts at the diner, anything that kept his hands busy and his mind quiet. Every time his phone lit up with her name, he stared at it until it dimmed again. He wasn't angry, he was afraid. Afraid because Fallon had cracked something open in him he'd sealed shut years ago. And now, she'd offered him an opportunity he hadn't dared dream of, and he didn't know how to accept it without feeling like he was betraying the life he'd built for Sophie with scraped knees and calloused palms. But on the 4th day, something shifted. He was walking Sophie home from school when she tugged on his hand and said, "Why haven't we seen Fallon?" He stopped in the middle of the sidewalk. Sophie looked up at him with brows furrowed. "Did she stop liking us?" "No, Bug. Fallon's just giving me some space." Sophie tilted her head. "That doesn't sound like her." Aiden crouched beside her. "Sometimes adults get scared too, even when we don't want to." Sophie was quiet for a moment before she whispered, "But I miss her." He looked at his daughter, his reason for every decision he'd ever made, and realized something. Maybe fear wasn't protecting them anymore. Maybe it was just keeping them stuck. That night, after Sophie fell asleep with her worn-out stuffed rabbit tucked under one arm, He pulled out the envelope Fallon had given him and opened the gallery letter again. He ran his thumb over the embossed logo, then flipped to the back where she'd scribbled a note. "Not because I want you to change, because I want you to believe." He set the letter down, crossed the apartment to the counter, and picked up his sketchbook. The last page was a half-finished drawing of a subway platform at dusk. He sat down and kept drawing. The next morning, Fallon walked into her office and nearly dropped her tablet. Aiden was sitting in the guest chair across from her assistant's desk, wearing jeans, boots, and a navy wool coat that didn't belong to him. It belonged to someone who had slept more than 4 hours, someone who had finally exhaled. Her heart thudded once hard. He stood slowly. "Can we talk?" She nodded and led him into her office, closing the door behind them. "I owed you an explanation," he said. "I didn't know how to give it." "You don't owe me anything, Aiden." "I do. I pushed you away because I didn't think I deserved what you were offering. I've spent so long surviving that I stopped thinking I could ever do more." Fallon didn't speak. She let him finish. "I thought if I let you in, I'd lose control of everything I've held together with duct tape and late nights. But you saw something in me I forgot was still there." He reached into his coat pocket and set a small wrapped bundle on her desk. Fallon unwrapped it slowly. Inside was a charcoal sketch of her, barefoot in his kitchen, laughing over a spilled tray of muffins. "I thought you deserved to know what you look like when you're not trying to impress anyone," he said. "It's how I see you." Her fingers trembled slightly as she traced the edge of the paper. "You didn't have to give me this." "I didn't come to give it," he said. "I came to ask you something." As she looked up, "I want to believe in the life you see. I want to give Sophie a future that isn't just patching holes and counting pennies. But I can't do it without you, and I don't want to." Fallon's eyes shimmered, but her voice was steady. "Then don't." He stepped closer. "I love you." She nodded once. "I know, and I love you too." They didn't kiss, not yet. Instead, she reached into the drawer of her desk and pulled out a small velvet box. "Before you panic," she said, "it's not what you think." He opened it. Inside was a silver key. "To the new space I bought for your studio," she said. "It's yours. No strings. Use it. Ignore it. Burn it and start over. But it's yours." He looked at her. "You really don't do anything halfway." "No," she said, "and I never will." Later that week, the gallery exhibit opened. The space was packed journalists, collectors, artists, but Aiden only cared about one thing: Sophie running into the room wearing a dress Fallon had helped her pick out, dragging Fallon behind her. Fallon wore a pale suit, her hair tucked behind one ear, simple and stunning. She stopped beside him and slipped her hand into his. Sophie beamed. "Your drawings are on the wall, Daddy." Aiden laughed. "I noticed." She tugged on his arm. "Can I show you my favorite one?" "Lead the way, Bug." Fallon watched them walk toward the back wall, father and daughter, their steps in sync, the crowd parting around them like water around a boat. Later that night, back at the apartment, Sophie fell asleep between them on the couch, exhausted from excitement. Fallon brushed a strand of hair from the girl's forehead and whispered, "She's the best part of you." Aiden looked at her. "You're the best part of what's next." He hesitated, then pulled a small box from beneath the couch cushion and held it out. Fallon blinked. "What is this?" "I figured if we're building something new," he said, "we should start with a foundation." Inside was a simple gold band, no diamonds, no embellishments, just real, strong metal. She looked up at him. "Are you sure?" He nodded once, more sure than I've ever been. Fallon didn't cry. She just leaned in and kissed him, soft and certain. The next morning, Sophie woke up to find her father in the kitchen making pancakes, and Fallon at the table sketching something on a napkin. Sophie rubbed her eyes. Are we all gonna live here now? Aiden grinned. What do you think? She climbed into Fallon's lap without hesitation. I think we're gonna need more syrup. Fallon laughed. That can handle. Outside, the sun broke through the clouds and spilled over the fire escape, lighting up the window like a promise. And inside, a new life was beginning, built not on wealth or power, but on something stronger. Love that never needed rescuing, only a chance to be seen. The ring was simple, but the life they built from that moment forward was anything but. Fallon didn't announce their engagement with press releases or charity photo shoots. There were no headlines, no whispers on the finance blogs. Instead, she put the ring on her finger one morning as Sophie braided her hair at the kitchen table and said, I think we should have the wedding in the fall. Aiden, flipping pancakes nearby, glanced over. Fall's good, gives us time. Sophie nodded approvingly. Can I wear glitter shoes? Fallon touched her braid gently. You can wear anything you want. The months passed quickly, but not without effort. Fallon adjusted her schedule, stepping back from weekly board meetings and training her executive team to lead without her shadow. She didn't want her life with Aiden to be something she fit in between appointments. It had to be a foundation, not a side project. Aiden, for his part, finished setting up the studio space Fallon had given him, but not until he'd signed a lease agreement and insisted on paying rent. She hadn't argued. Instead, she helped him paint the walls a warm gray that made the sketches pop and connected him with an art consultant who had once bought a sculpture for a museum in Berlin. He didn't change who he was. He still fixed leaky pipes in his building, still picked up Sophie from school with a backpack slung over one shoulder. But now, he brought her to the gallery on weekends, where she sat in the corner with crayons while he worked on commissions. One afternoon in late August, Fallon stepped into the studio, holding a thin manila envelope. There's a letter for you, she said. Aiden wiped his hands on a cloth. From who? The city. They want to feature you in a public art initiative, murals in underserved schools. They saw your latest piece, someone posted it online. He opened the envelope, scanning the pages. They want 5 locations. You'll do it right. He looked up. Only if you help me design the one at Sophie's school. She raised an eyebrow. You trust me with paint? No, he said, but I trust you with meaning. Fallon didn't cry. Not when they signed the mural agreement. Not when she helped Aiden hang his first commissioned piece in a collector's home in Tribeca. Not even when Sophie brought home a crayon drawing of the 3 of them under a rainbow with hearts floating overhead and wrote, My family, in crooked letters. But she cried the day they got married. It was a small ceremony in the courtyard of the brownstone building where Aiden and Sophie lived. Fairy lights were strung between the fire escapes, and the neighbors all leaned out their windows to watch. Fallon wore a dress that was simple and soft, with no designer label. Sophie walked her down the makeshift aisle, holding Fallon's hand like she'd been born to do it. Aiden waited under an arch of ivy and lights, his shirt collar open, his face completely unguarded. When the officiant asked Fallon if she promised to love, protect, and choose him every day, she didn't hesitate. I already do. Afterward, they danced in the courtyard as Sophie spun in a circle nearby, her glitter shoes catching the light. You know, Fallon said, swaying in Aiden's arms, I used to think love had to be all fire and thunder. And now I think it's coffee at dawn, crayons on the floor, knowing someone sees all your broken pieces and still wants to build something with you. He kissed her forehead. I want every version of you, Fallon. The calm, the chaos, the woman who gets flour in her hair trying to make muffins. She laughed, and I want every version of you, the man who shows up, who doesn't flinch when things get hard, who makes a life out of nothing but grit and love. They didn't go on a 2-week honeymoon to some island or fly off in a private jet. They went to a cabin upstate, just the three of them. They built fires, roasted marshmallows, and watched Sophie collect rocks she deemed magical. On their last night there, Aiden sat on the porch, Fallon nestled beside him beneath a blanket. "She's going to remember this," Fallon said. "Not the wedding, this, the quiet." "That's the point," he replied. "This is the life we're giving her." Fallon rested her head on his shoulder. "I never thought I'd find this." "You didn't find it, you made space for it." They sat in silence, the sound of frogs and distant laughter floating through the trees. Back in the city, life resumed, but it was different now. Fallon brought Sophie to school every Tuesday. Aiden's mural at the elementary school became a landmark. People took photos in front of it, but he always said the best part was watching the kids trace the painted stars with their fingers. Fallon's company continued to grow, but she no longer needed to prove herself in every room. She had a team she trusted, and she focused her energy on projects that built community housing and renovated parks in neglected areas. One evening in late November, Fallon came home to find Aiden in the kitchen, flour on his shirt, Sophie on a stool beside him with cookie dough smudged on her cheek. "We're experimenting," he said. "With science?" Fallon asked. "With cinnamon," Sophie clarified. "Too much is never enough." Fallon kissed the top of her head. "Completely agree." They ate slightly burnt cookies on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, watching a movie they'd all seen before. And when Sophie fell asleep halfway through, Aiden carried her to bed, then returned to find Fallon holding a folder in her lap. "What's that?" he asked. She opened it. Inside were drawings, dozens of them, all his. "I want to turn these into a book," she said. "Aiden Langley's New York, your version, not the polished one, the one that actually breathes." He sat beside her. "You really think people want to see that?" "Yes," she said, "because it's real, and people are starving for real." He looked at the drawings, then at her. "Let's do it." They submitted it to a publishing house the next week. It sold out its first printing in 3 days. By spring, the city had commissioned a sculpture installation from him. Fallon helped with the logistics, but the design was his. Sophie came to the unveiling with a notebook, sketching her own version of the piece and declaring she'd be an art wizard when she grew up. One night, months later, Aiden stood on the rooftop of their building, watching the lights of the city flicker below. Fallon stepped beside him, holding 2 mugs of tea. "This city used to feel like it was swallowing me," he said. "And now it feels like something we tamed." She wrapped an arm around his waist. "We didn't tame it. We carved out our own corner and made it ours." He kissed her slowly, deliberately. The city roared below, but up there it was just them. And everything they had built from a suitcase, a cup of coffee, and a chance worth taking.